Okay, so we're gonna do the model of the Rock-Cycle lab, and there are a couple things that I need to call to your attention right off the top. The first thing is there's an error on the third page, the number 4 procedure. It should say remove the packet using tongs and allow it to cool and compress it. That and compress it is really important for you to know which part of the Rock-Cycle that you're dealing with. The other thing is some of the questions asks you, is there anything missing in this part of the process? There are several places where this comes up. What are the limitations of making this type of rock from the model? Is there anything missing in the process? And I think we have that again. It's in a couple of places. Anyway, it's important to remember that when you answer that question, there might be nothing missing from the process, or there might be one thing, there might be two things, okay? You'll need to look at your Rock-Cycle schematic, the diagram that I'm giving you, to figure out if there's anything missing from the process. So it might be nothing. So don't rack your brains if you can't think of anything that's missing. One of these questions has nothing missing in the process, so that's just a hint for you. For the lab, if you look, the first procedure is to obtain 3 different colored crayons, which we've done here. Remove the paper from each crayon and then examine the crayon and describe it below. So the observation is to describe the nature of the bare crayon. So what shape is it? Is it rough or smooth? And then the conclusion part, if this were to represent a type of rock, what type would it be? Think about how crayons are made. Crayons are probably poured from hot wax and compressed into a mold. So the wax is probably heated and compressed. So you need to think about what type of a rock the bare crayon, the whole crayon would represent. The thing that we need to do is use a veggie peeler to peel the crayons. We're gonna make a little pile of shavings, and then we'll put the next color pile of shavings on top of that, and then the third color pile of shavings on top of it. Right now we've got 2 colors of the shaved crayons going on the aluminum foil. My trusty helper has gotten purple crayons and is working on the pink crayon, and we'll put the third color crayon on top of that. So we've done procedure 2, which was using a vegetable peeler or knife, shave off tiny pieces or shavings of each of the 3 crayons. And we had them in separate piles, but now we've compiled them on top of each other. So we kind of did procedure 2 and procedure 3. But as far as procedure 2, as far as just the shavings go, just the plain shavings, what part of the Rock-Cycle do the shavings represent? You'll need to look at your Rock-Cycle schematic to see what that would represent, separate little pieces. And where in nature would you find that item that the shavings represent? Then procedure 3, we kind of already did. We piled the colors of shavings on top of one another. And so now I'm gonna fold the packet up so that I'm not really disturbing them, hopefully. But kind of flattening them. So you want to make a packet about, I can see where my pile of shavings is, it's right about here. So I'm going to fold up my packet. Trying to feel where that is. Oh, and be glad that you missed out on the part of shaving the crayons, because it's absolutely the worst thing in the world. Okay, so I've got the packet and my shavings are in here. So I folded them up, and I'm gonna use, it says to press on the packet with your hands using your upper body weight, but I don't have a lot of upper body weight. So I'm gonna use the block and my tiny little bit of upper body weight. I feel like I'm on QVC, I should have had a manicure. Okay. And then you open the packet up. So what have you done? We've compressed the shavings. There we go. So the first thing you do is describe what you actually see there. Just say what happened. And then the conclusion is, what part of the rock cycle does this model represent and why? So you look at your schematic and you decide what part of the rock cycle this represents. And in that same portion, where it's the portion of the rock cycle, you should also state what type of rock you've just made. And then where would you find something like this type of rock in nature? Where would this type of rock be made in nature? And then what's the limitation of using crayons to represent the making of this type of rock? So you need to think about the type of rock that you made by looking at your rock cycle schematic and figure out look back at your notes. It's really important that you look back at your class notes and decide what items in nature you need to make this type of rock, and is there anything that we couldn't represent in making this type of rock that would occur in nature but we couldn't represent it here, right? So that's where we say, what is the limitation of using crayons to represent this making of this type of rock? On to procedure 4. Okay, I'm trying to do 100 things at once, so bear with me. You're going to fold your packet into a little boat shape and basically leave it open at the top because we're going to put it on the heater. I don't know if you can still see this or not. It's not very neat, but I'll fold it into a little boat shape. And then we're gonna carry it over to the hot plate and put it on there. So now we're gonna hold it over the hot plate. You can see that it's we're not trying to get it completely liquid, but we're trying to get it so that it's a little bit melty. So be thinking about what type of, wow, that hot plate's really hot. Be thinking about what kind of rock you're making now, because it would have to be from melted rock material. Heated, I guess I should say, not melted maybe. Just trying to get that middle part. It's a little bit thick. So we want to get it a little bit liquidy, but we don't want it to be completely melted. There we go. Okay, that's as far as I'm going to take it because I don't want to make it into complete. So now we've got it kind of melted and we're going to compress it. This is procedure number 4, where I told you to add and compress it because I don't know that I fixed that in your lab. I may have, but the copy that I have doesn't have it fixed. So just to make sure. So we got it warm and now we're compressing it. So that's what it looks like. And you need to look at your schematic and tell me what portion of the rock cycle this represents and why. So we heated it and we put it under pressure. So you need to tell me what portion of the rock cycle it represents and what type of rock you made, and be sure to tell me why. And then what are the limitations of making this kind of rock from the model? Is there anything missing in the process? The next thing we're going to do is place this back on the hot plate until it's completely melted. So now we've got it back on the hot plate, and we're going to let it get completely melted. It shouldn't take very long because it's a really hot plate. You can see it bubbling up. And if you were here, you'd get to smell what burning crayon smells like. It's not very nice. Just gonna get that little spot in the middle. Okay, let's call it melted because I really don't want to burn the foil. Completely melted rock material. And in our observations conclusions, this is under procedure 5. You need to tell me what portion of the rock cycle this represents. So what type of rock is made from completely melted liquid rock? And where would we find the melted material coming from? And what is the melted material called? So you'll need to look back to your notes, and please use your notes for all of this. You will need to look back at your notes and tell me what type of rock we just made from completely melted material and what the melted material is called. And then this type of rock usually has to come through from the center of the earth. So what part of the rock's process could we not represent and why? So you need to think about how this rock gets back to the surface of the earth and how we couldn't represent that. Lastly, procedure 6, you're going to draw a simple diagram of the rock cycle, show the 3 different types and the processes they undergo to create each type. So here, just use your paper to draw. You don't have to have something that looks like the Mona Lisa, but you do need to do a very simple, rudimentary model of the rock cycle, and you just get that directly from the rock cycle schematic that you have.